All right, we are recording.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen. All right, let's do this. We are here to talk about resumes and formatting, and whether you happen to bring your own resume today for the question and answer section at the end, or if you're just here to take some notes, whatever is welcome. We are here to cover almost everything. I don't exactly call myself an expert in resume writing, but having a journalism and technical communications background, I market myself as a technical writer. And the thing that technical writers do is page design and detailed editing. And that's what resume making is. So I've made a lot of resumes for grades to pass college. So I'm not an expert, but I do know what I'm talking about. So to start off with resumes, the most important thing is that they are concise and they present the information in a method that employers are going to quickly understand, be able to scan quickly so that they can find what they're looking for, and that it'll stand out in the pile of 50, 100, 150 other resumes that are on the human resources person's desk. And that's a lot to put on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It really is. It's very difficult for people who have been in a business or in a career field for, I don't know, 10 years. That's a lot of information to put on one piece of paper. And the average length of a resume is 1 page. Some people get to go to 2, depending on if their information is really that good, but most people are stuck on 1 page. So we're going to be working in the mindset of a 1-page resume today. I have a blank basic resume that I have a link that I can share with everyone today. And if you guys want to pass it on to other Vistas who couldn't make it today, VISTA Leaders, if you can pass it on to your cohorts, or if you want to just pass it on to your friends so they have it. I do not care who you share it to, because I want people to have something to work with that they can use. I'll also be showing you the evolution of my own personal resume from where it started the first time that I made it to what it is that I turned in to get my service job as a VISTA, what got me here. And then we'll have the question and answer section, and just kind of any questions you have about your resume, about what I've talked about, anything like that. I'm here to share what I know. So to get started, we're going to talk about the 4 fundamentals of making a resume. And that is that no matter what your resume looks like, it needs to be crap. This is a fun little acronym that gets tossed around in the technical writing world. And it sounds kind of like, why would you use that acronym? Couldn't it be anything else? Not exactly. The 4 fundamentals that you need are contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. I will toss this link to the article in the chat in a moment so that you guys can read it over on your own time. But the specifics about having contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity on your resume is the contrast helps things stand out. It helps employers know where they're looking for things. So this could be section headers, this could be 2 different colors, this could be 2 different font sizes or font types. Just anything that is a noticeable difference between the first object and the second object to make it stand out. Repetition goes more into your language use than it does items on a page. So this would be making sure that you're using past tense for jobs that you have had in the past, or using present tense if it's a job that you are currently holding to show what you are actively doing at that job. And of course, it can go into the design element of your resume too, if that is something that you're looking for in the resume. It can go into whether you use the same heading at specific intervals, whether you use the same font type, whether you use the same colors, stuff like that. Alignment is very important, especially if you are applying for a job that is very detail oriented, because you're most likely giving this resume to somebody who is really, really good at picking out the finest details. And I've known people who can pick out if a line is 0.1 increments to the right of where it should be compared to everything else. So some people will really, really catch those little nitpicky details. Not everybody, not necessarily for all of the jobs that a lot of Vistas will be going to after service, like education. They aren't particularly concerned about specific details like that because they're more focused on your more tangible abilities and how you interact in person. They're not going to necessarily care about if you have everything aligned perfectly on a paper. But alignment is important just to keep a paper looking neat, to keep it looking professional, and to keep it simplified. So alignment is where white space comes into play. We're using blank space to amplify and support text that you put on the page comes into play. And proximity, again, white space, figuring out where you need to put words and where you need to leave a space for it to be legible and readable. So I will use those four, use those four fundamentals to go over my own example of resume. So this first one is one that I did early in college, my freshman, sophomore year. Not the best, but I say not the best from the standpoint of having made this over a couple of times. So that's self-critique. But this might be what a lot of people's first resume looks like. And that's okay. It really is okay, depending on the job that you're applying for and depending on how much experience you have. This is a very basic layout. It's kind of organized, could be better. And this, I guess the first thing I can point out is that alignment isn't necessarily the best. I am used to picking out alignment, and this looks like a straight line down the side of these, but isn't necessarily. It's a good first try. And if your resume looks like this, don't feel bad about what I'm saying, because for you, this could work perfectly. It really could. But for what I'm doing, for trying to get into technical writing, for getting into page design, this I would be put in the no pile almost immediately. So this is my second attempt at making a resume. Completely different, right? It's a huge changeover from the first one. And that's because a couple of years went by and I got into a class that talked about creating a brand for yourself, creating a way to market yourself and make yourself stand out in the job world. So my brand is kind of postmodern. I know there was another word my professor used, but I can't think of it right now. So we're just going to go with postmodern. And I think that this resume type fits me and my personality a lot better. It's very sleek. It's very trimmed, cut edges. It's very straightforward and professional, in my opinion. And that's how I want to be seen when I apply for a job. I want to be seen as straightforward. I want to be seen as professional, and I want to be seen as put together, basically. So some major differences between the first resume and this resume is there's a lot more information here. There's quite a different layout. And this allows me to bring up a couple of things that, I don't know where you guys are coming from on what you've heard personally about resumes or not, but a couple of things that my professors went back and forth on, and that I've heard back and forth from employers and hiring personnel, is first and foremost, whether or not to have your picture on a resume. I err on the side of don't do this. So my picture is on this one because this was for a class and I just had to make it look kind of professional and I wanted to get a grade. So the reason that I say don't put your picture on there is because that leans into a hiring manager being able to discriminate against you justifiably or secretively. Like they can just straight up look at your picture and decide, no, we don't want you for blank reason, without ever telling you. And that's not good for you. It's not ethical for them, but it's really not good for you. So having your picture on the resume kind of hurts you in the long run. Even if you have the most amazing professional smile in the world, it can hurt you in the long run. I know that there are some companies that ask for you to put your picture on your resume. And if you really want that job, if you really need that job, go for it 100%. But if you're mass applying for positions like for a summer job or an internship or something, I would err away from pictures just for that, to protect you from unnecessary discrimination. Because if they just look at my name, they're like, okay, Rebecca, probably a girl. We don't know about how old she is. We don't know, what her ethnic background is, stuff like that. So we have to go based on what she's written down as her experience. Whereas if I have my picture on there, they can kind of tell my age, they can tell my ethnicity, stuff like that. So just be careful about that and use your best judgment. So I will now move on to my last example, which this is all right, this is more updated than I thought it was. Sorry. But this resume is it's basically the culmination of all of my experience up to this point. So at the top, I'm zoomed out so that you can see the whole resume. So I'm sorry if it's a little hard to read, but I have my VISTA experience down. I have my experience at City Year down, and everything is now aligned. It's repeating itself. It has the contrast of the colors and the black and white and the small font and the big font, and then the proximity. Everything is close to a visible line, and the white space makes it easier to read. So I'm happy with how my resume turned out. And of course, not all of you need to get this fancy with your resume. I promise you 100%. This does not need to be what you need to compare yourself to. This resume works for me as what I market myself as. I am a technical writer, I am an editor, so I need a clean-cut, professional-looking resume that shows that I know what I'm doing and I can work with the software that I'd be working with if I was hired by a professional company. You guys don't need this, not necessarily. If you're a technical writer, cool, awesome, welcome to the club. If not, don't worry about it. So with that said, my Zoom menu came down. Go away. I want my tab. Okay. This is a basic outline of a resume that I put together to help a friend because he wanted to redesign his resume. So this is a basic outline. It looks a little busy with the tables visible, but fun fact about this is once you fill in all of your information, so you put your degree in, you put what year you graduated, you put in your job experience, where it was, how long you worked there, you highlight the tables, you go into the table settings, and you just make the lines disappear. and it looks really neat, really clean cut. No one will ever know that you used a table to put it in, promise. So I will put this link in the chat so that you guys can look at it, and then we will jump into talking about the layout and going ahead and answering some questions that you guys might have. There we go.
Wow, this was really good. This is some good information. I know my question is probably relative to the two-pager resume.
Okay.
So can you still, or could I still use that? I was going to say, can I still use your spreadsheet for my two-pager? And what size font is the smallest that you recommend using on a resume?
Okay. I'll answer the font question first because that'll apply to everybody. The smallest that you want to go with font is between 10 and 12 point font. So I would try really hard to keep 12 point font because that is the most legible small font size that you can use for any given font. But then again, depending on your font type and depending on the layout of your resume, you might get away with 10. So if you use 10, then you definitely want to use a serif font. And I'm throwing terminology at you guys, I'm sorry, but for serif and sans serif fonts, serif are the fonts that have the little feet and dashes on the ends of letters. So Times New Roman is a very popular serif font. And then sans serif is without feet, without serifs. So that would be like Arial or Calibra or Comic Sans, but do not use Comic Sans on your resume, please. I beg of you. All of my college professors beg of you, do not use Comic Sans on your resume.
Okay.
And
I tend to use, I like Times New Roman quite a bit, but then my alter ego goes with Arial. That's about as you know, daring as I get.
Well, to go off on a slight font rant, it is good to have a serif and a sans serif couple to use on your resume. So sans serif fonts are really good for headers. They're really good for grabbing attention. They're really good for postmarking, like, hey, this section is over here, or this section is over here. And then serif is a good body font because it's easy to read in smaller font sizes because the serifs help you move from letter to letter. If you guys want to expand your font library, I recommend fontpair.co or .com. And then I know Google has a font database that you can download fonts for free. That's where I got my two fonts. I use Josephine Slab and Josephine Sans as my two fonts on my resume. So definitely check out FontPair. It's a really good website. And to answer your two-page question, Patrice, you can definitely use the resume, the blank outline that I shared. You would just keep adding, I'm assuming for you, to the experience and maybe to the education sections. You could just keep tabbing and it would enter new slots and just keep repeating that pattern of job title, description, year, location, stuff like that. And you could just keep filling that out and out and out. So.
Okay. I will do that. We do Oh, did you put this in the chat? Yeah, you put that in the chat.
Yep, I shared the link in the chat, and it should be available to everyone with the link.
Yep.
That should be good.
So I like the idea. I've seen a lot of resumes in my years of HR experience. So I like that you brought up the idea about photos, whether or not to add them, and discrimination that can occur when you do that. And I say the same for address. I've seen resumes where people just put in their email address, because if you put in your street address, especially if you live in Detroit, there might be some discrimination going on there. So you have to, you really have to think about the company that you're applying for and maybe do some research and see if they are diverse, and maybe you add just an email address as opposed to a complete address. That's something to think about. And as far as pages, you're right, it does go to your experience level. I only recently, since last year, got my resume down to 1 page because I had so much experience and I've been in so many different fields. So I'm not looking to go back into HR, but I had to somehow convey the message that those skills are transferable. And sometimes that's brought out in the cover letter to make it very obvious to the hiring manager. And I've heard a couple things as far as font as well. So because I have a lot of experience, I reduced it to 10 font size. And then the 12 is more preferable for the reader, but if you have a lot of experience and you just really want to get it down to 1 page, I'd say, 10 is good. And I saw a resume last year when I was at VISTA, somebody submitted a resume and I really liked it and I changed over to that form. I can share it later when I find it. And I also worked at what was it, Operation Able of Michigan, and that was a long time ago. And at that time, people were still putting their date of birth and their social security numbers on their resumes. And of course, that's an absolute no. So I just wanted to add those few things. But I love what you're saying. It's great information.
No, I appreciate you mentioning that, Kay. Your background definitely helps add on to this topic and gives a very much needed perspective on it. And I'm glad that you mentioned addresses on resumes. I have my address fully on my resume, and it's my parents' home address because that's where I am. One of the, I don't want to say theories, but one of the things I was told about the address on the resume is because back in the day when you would apply for jobs, sometimes the companies would send you application packets or more information after you finished applying for the job. So that's one of the reasons that addresses still hang around on resumes. Another thing that I was told, especially if you, well, I guess I can say we're a college student on campus, since not many campuses are open right now. There was the debate about whether you put your parents' home address because that was a more stable address, or if you put your college address to reinforce the fact that you are a student and you can only work so much. I never put my college address. I always stuck with my parents' address because that was going to more than likely be where I was applying for jobs during the summer rather than up where I was at college because I would be going home. So address is definitely up to your discretion. You can choose whether or not you put it on. You can choose whether or not you keep it off. But like Kay mentioned, definitely put a professional email. Make sure it's not catlover59 or something like that. Make a professional email with your full name or a abbreviated version of your name. So mine is Rebecca L. Bostick, but I could have done R. Bostick or Bostick R or something like that. So make sure you have a professional email and that you do put your phone number. I know there's a couple of free apps where you can get a work line on your phone, but I say free with a asterisk next to it because the app might be free, but you might have to pay for the line. I'm not sure. That's a tangent that I'm definitely not an expert on. So yeah, thanks for reminding me and bringing up addresses, Kay. That was a good thing to mention and talk about.
Sure. Can I also add that there are several types of resumes, so you can do a functional or a chronological. And if you have a lot of experience, you might want to do a functional resume. But many times when you're when people are interviewing you and they're looking at your resume, they don't like to see gaps in time. Even under COVID, you know, they want to see something like I was on unemployment, or what is it? Or I was seeking work. Anytime you have a gap, they're like trying to pinpoint you into something. So I used to do that a lot as well. And then as far as for you all right now, it's perfectly fine that you put on your graduation date. But anybody who's trying to discriminate, they look at the resume, and that's kind of tricky, because I've also been with managers who said, oh, they didn't put their date of graduation on it. They're probably too old, and they tossed the resume. So it's kind of iffy, but for you right now, there's no problem putting in your graduation date. It's just as you get older, that becomes a problem.
Yeah, the different types of resume are important, and how you present information. Definitely. I have my graduation date on there because it's so recent, like you mentioned, and I think I went with chronological, where in case some of you haven't heard this terminology with resumes, chronological is when you place your most recent experience first and foremost, and then work your way back in time. So on my most recent resume, I have my VISTA experience, I have my city year experience, I have my job at Ferris as the copywriter, or copy editor rather, for our school newspaper. I have a internship I did with Gemini Publications in Grand Rapids. And then I have my 2 summer jobs that I did at Hot Topic and McDonald's, as you know, fabulous as those are, just to round it out and show that since I was able in the state of Michigan to work, that, you know, I have been trying to work, and I've just been working around school. So what's your question, Crystal?
Hello, ladies.
Hello.
I too am one of those persons who have an extensive work history. However, and my current resume right now is 2 pages. I find it just so difficult to narrow it down to 1 page. And I also have a 1-page cover letter. So I guess my question is twofold. Can you give too much information in your cover letter? And a kind of a sub-question to that one is, if you can, how do you know when to turn it off? And because I was in a certain job for 25 years, but that's nothing like what I now have my degree in, or the type of work that I am searching for. But I also want to give people, or let the people know that I have an extensive work history, that I'm stable enough to have a career for 25 years. And then that takes me into the 2nd page and blah, blah, blah. So it's a little confusing as to, and then sometimes it depends on who's reading the resume.
Mm-hmm.
So please help me if you can, because if you don't, I'm going to need therapy.
Oh my goodness.
I already do anyway, but that would just be an excuse.
Oh, no pressure or anything.
Yeah, exactly. No pressure, Rebecca.
Okay. Well, on an aside, if you want to send your resume to me too, I can look it over and send you some more specific notes on it if you'd like.
I
But
would love to do that.
I'll also try to answer some of your questions real quick because this can help everybody. First and foremost, most definitely, if you've worked a job for more than 5, let alone more than 10, let alone 25 years, most definitely keep that as a mentionable factor in your resume and your cover letter. The purpose of coupling a cover letter, with a resume is the cover letter is meant to be where you kind of word vomit. I use that because you shouldn't really just throw words on your cover letter, but it's really where you're meant to dive into more information about what's on your resume. Resumes, from what I've gone through with professors and helping friends and just seeing other people's and how they make them, the resume could be thought of more as a bulleted list. It very blatantly and bluntly states, this is my job. This is how long I worked. This is the title of what I did. These are the things I did. So the resume is this short, sweet, very to the point description. Whereas in your cover letter, you take a paragraph, you have your introductory paragraph, and then your first paragraph, for example, Crystal, with yours, I would say that after your introductory paragraph, your very first paragraph should be saying, I worked this job for 25 years. And for those 25 years, this is what I did. Because it shows where you came from. It's exemplifying your work ethic. It's exemplifying your ability to stay with that job for so long. And it's showing that not only did you stay with the job for so long, but that the job kept you for so long, that you were doing something right to be there for 25 years. So it's definitely something that you should mention. And I'm guessing that that's probably where the unbalance is in the length of the resume versus covering it in your cover letter. Is 25 years is a long time to rack up skills, to rack up experience, and to rack up, these are the different things that I did. So when it comes to explaining what you did on a resume under a job, my best suggestion for everyone is to avoid full sentences. Instead, you could just, instead of saying, I led a team of 10 people to discuss the business analytics of 3 different companies, you could say, I'm not good at doing this from my brain. I'm usually writing these things down. But you could do instead, led a small group in comparing business analytics with competitors. So you just, on resumes, you want to pluck those key phrases, those key words from your experience, from your skills, and you want to put those on your resume because that's what's going to pop out when they look at your resume first. And then in your cover letter, that's where you want to look and you say, okay, so I mentioned that I led this group and I looked at these business analytics. So in my paragraph, I want to say, I worked with a group of 10 people. I worked in a very diverse group of 10 people where our job every single week was to collect the information from our 3 different competing companies and go over the analytics to see what was working and what wasn't. So your cover letter is where you really turn those key phrases and key words into full descriptions of what you did. There's another 2-part question. I know it. Crystal, help me. What else am I missing to answer for you?
Actually, that's quite helpful, what you've already told me.
I'm glad. If it comes to me, I'll try to answer it for you or send a follow-up email.
Yeah, that just knowing that I can send it over to you maybe sometime later this week. You know, that's very comforting.
Yeah.
I guess to know that you would be willing to take a look at it for me sometime.
Definitely.
Thank you for that.
Definitely. And I open that invitation to all of you. If you want me to look over your resume or give you some personal pointers, I'm more than welcome to, because every resume is a very unique case. Like, Crystal has 25 years experience in one job, whereas I just graduated from college. I have yet to hold a job for more than 6 months. So go VISTA, we're on month 6. I can make it to month 7, I believe. So, you know, resumes are as unique as the people who write and make them. There's no such thing as a perfect resume. There's just a unique and effective resume. So if you guys are looking at your resumes, listening to what I'm saying, looking at my resumes and going, oh man, am I going to get hired off of this? Please do not worry about it, because everyone has a very unique case, and your resume could be absolutely perfect for what you're doing.
And if I can add to that, I would also say that one resume, as you gain experience, you're probably going to have more than one resume, believe it or not, because you're going to tailor it to the job that you're seeking. And then you're also going to learn, you're going to know that when an employer looks at a resume, they've probably done so much word search already through the software that says, okay, these are the keywords that I'm looking for. So you want to look at the job description that's out there and kind of tailor your resume to it and use some of their words. So when they do the word search, they're finding the words that they put out there. And then secondly, I'd also say when you are bulleting, you want to say, here's what I did and here's why I did it. So I can say that I lifted 50 pounds. So what? Well, I lifted 50 pounds to place this pallet over for delivery, you know? So I just didn't do this action. It actually had a reason for it. So that's the other thing. And also, you're right, Rebecca, in talking about tenses, because I always have to go back and recheck my resume to make sure that those last jobs that I don't do anymore, because you tend to use your resume and you update it, but you don't always go back to the first jobs you had and change those to past tenses. So that's very, very important.
Yeah.
And Crystal, you talked about too much info and when to turn it off. Yeah, there is that. If your resume, if your cover letter is going to like a whole page and it's more than an introduction, that's probably too much information. Nobody's going to read it. I can tell you that. So go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I've heard that before too. So I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, and so that's why it's good to look at the job and figure out how your resume can best represent that you can do that job. So there are combinations of resumes that are chronological, because in the last 5 years, you've only been doing things that apply to this job you're currently applying for. And prior to that, you did a different job. And maybe you have a functional resume at that lower end of the resume, so that you're not wasting a lot. Oh my gosh, you can, because I had resumes that had so much stuff on it as I transitioned from molecular biology to human resources to nonprofit. And each time I had to somehow make my resume fit without adding all the extra stuff. But I can also, in my cover letter, describe how these skills are transferable, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So on a tangent off of what Kay mentioned, I'm gonna share my screen again, hopefully. as your resumes evolve and as you work on filling them out and getting more and more into what you want to be doing long term. Like, I'm not even there yet. I went to school for one thing, but as I've gone through City Year and Vista, I'm kind of like, maybe technical writing isn't the only thing I want to do. As you go through and as you evolve with your resume, and this is something you might want to consider, Crystal, to looking at your resume and going forward. I have my skills listed off to the side because my skills, they're, I don't want to say interchangeable, but I also don't want to say independent. They can relate to different experience that I have. So I wouldn't have worked with the Adobe products or the Microsoft Office products if I hadn't have gotten my job as the copy editor for the newspaper. So those specifically relate to that. However, those are still skills that I have on the side that I keep practicing on my own time, that I can keep working at and that I can keep using and that I can keep improving as the technology changes over time. So I have my skills off to the side because I mentioned a couple of them under experience, but the skills are off to the side because those are things that I've collected the most over the years that I've had jobs. And those are the ones that I will always have. Those are the ones that will always stick with me. Those are the things that even if I change out my experience, like 2 years from now, I might say, okay, it's been a couple of years. I'm going to boot copy editor off of my resume because now whatever job I've been working is going to go to the top of the list and be the most recent and the most relevant. The skills are going to stay the same. But say from copy editing, I mentored 2 junior copy editors. So now maybe under hardware skills, which is an inside joke that I made about having software and hardware skills, because that's my personality sneaking in. Sorry. Maybe I put under my skills that I have that aren't computer related, mentoring or team leading or something like that, that I can put down that I have leadership experience, but maybe that job isn't necessarily on the resume anymore. I don't know if this is making sense, if I'm conveying what I'm trying to say here. So if someone has a question, please ask.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying because we have hard skills and we have soft skills. And there's been a lot of research lately delving more into what soft skills really mean and how they translate into your ability to do the job and whether or not hard skills are really that hard. You know, like I have no computer skills. I mean, I do daily stuff, right?
Yep.
Enough to get by, but my soft skills are really from human resources, right? So I use that a lot to transfer into different jobs. Before, when I was in science, I just had hard skills. I could do lab work, I could do those kinds of things, set up experiments, protein analysis, PCR, that. But that was just specific for that job. And then I had to translate some of that into how I got into HR. So it's dicey. That's all I can say. So yeah, I think you did a good job. I understand exactly what you're saying between those two skill sets.
Thank you. Another thing I'll mention real quick while I'm on here, under software, which I can zoom in a little bit, there's Adobe InDesign, there's Microsoft Publisher, and there's Affinity Publisher. I'm mentioning these 3 because those are the big, those are page designing software. So this Google Drive outline that I've shared with you guys, this definitely works as a base outline. You do not necessarily have to go fancier than that. However, if you're in a profession where maybe they want a little more flair on your resume, or you personally come up with your brand to where you're like, I want to sell this brand in the market, but I don't have the ability to. Adobe InDesign, you have to pay a subscription fee monthly. They do have deals around like Black Friday and the holidays and Christmas and stuff like that. So if you can snag a deal like that, definitely go for it because it is a really good software. It's just pricey. Microsoft Publisher comes with the Office suite. It's really good. It's not as in tune as InDesign for finer detail work, but if you wanted to take this Google Drive basic outline and just add your logo up in the top corner, or if you wanted to add a watermark or something like that, Publisher is the better way to go because you can generally get it bundled with any other Office program that you buy. And then last but not least is Affinity Publisher. I have switched over to this personally. That's what I made this resume on. It is laid out exactly like InDesign. So if you have Adobe InDesign background, then Affinity Publisher won't be too, oh my gosh, for you. And it's a one-time payment, and it gives you free updates every time the software updates come out. So if you're looking for page design software updates, I recommend Affinity Publisher, just by the way. And Dana, right? I saw that you mentioned that you paid a resume writing company for help with your resume, which is okay if you can find the really good ones, but like you and Crystal said,
I got ripped off.
yeah, they kind of are.
It was like, because I did it through a payment thing, so it was like $300 freaking dollars, and then like after I looked at it, there was all type of grammar errors I missed, and I'm like, oh crap, and I've been submitting this, so that was definitely a lesson learned, and so now I always do stuff like this because resume writing is very overwhelming, and you know, like you guys said, you want to tailor it to each organization that you're applying to and whatnot. So it's constantly a work in progress, no matter how many different resumes you have made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely very, I'll put the term living document on a resume. It's definitely something that is constantly evolving because you're constantly evolving in your professional work life. So you need the document to change with you. And like Kay has mentioned, you have a different one for a bunch of different things. So you, to break down my personal experience, I could go editing, I could go technical writing, I could go strict AmeriCorps work at this point, and I have my customer service background. So I could have 4 different resumes going on. But for what I'm doing or what I'm aiming for, I can kind of muddle them all together because the purpose of my resume is to show that I have attention to detail. I am organized and self-sufficient, and that I play nice with other people and I can work in a group setting and on a team. So I can kind of merge those all together, but having the separate ones, depending on what you're applying for, definitely helps. And the other thing about resume writing companies, just as a PSA for all of you, there might be like 2 companies out there that really are good and really do want to help you with your resumes. But for the most part, they are all, as Dana said, kind of a ripoff because you can go on YouTube and you can YouTube a bunch of different videos and you can get all of this information for free. You can reach out to people who write blogs on this stuff, and you can get a lot of help for free without having to pay a resume writing company. So as a PSA, don't send it to a resume writing company because more than likely the people sending you the things of like, hey, we'll look at your resume, we'll update it for you, we'll give you a copy letter, stuff like that, more than likely they probably are going to mess it up more than help you. So it's better to look for help, but don't put your resume in someone else's hands. Keep it, hold on to it. That's yours. Protect it. Do you recommend having a job title on your resume? How do you mean that, Josh?
Like on your resume, you have like technical writer and like those kind of things. Like, do you recommend having something like that on your resume?
So let me share my, oh, Patrice, you took away my screen sharing abilities.
I'm sorry, I did. I was trying to, because it's 3 o'clock, I was trying to
Oh, it is.
dismiss or whatever. So maybe you can share, can you look at your resume and say what your titles were, or?
Yeah. So for the job titles, I would definitely recommend having them on there because, for example, with AmeriCorps, I'm an AmeriCorps VISTA, whereas there's an AmeriCorps VISTA leader, and there's also Patrice's job, which is above and tangented off of that. So it's good to specify what your job was so that you can then correlate what you did under that title. Because if they call for a reference and they say, Josh said that she was a cashier at your restaurant, what did she do? And they relay the information and they can
Hold on,
verify.
Rebecca. My question, sorry, I didn't say it right. So I meant like on how you have Rebecca Bostic and then underneath you have like editor and yeah,
Oh,
that.
okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so that thing up in the top left of my resume where I have Rebecca Bostic and then editor and technical writer, that's part of my brand. So that is, those are the two tags that I have to myself. That's what I'm marketing myself as an editor and a technical writer. Those are my primary skill sets. Those are what I am primarily marketing when I apply for jobs. So if you get to the point where you have these specific skill sets, if you are in this field that you want to do, and you can come up with a brand and a logo that incorporates that, 100% go for it. Because then as soon as you submit that resume and they see that logo and they see those two keywords, they're going to be like, this person is dedicated, this person knows what they're doing, they're going in our maybe pile. So I think it's, if you get to that point, definitely work it in there. If not, then if it's, it depends on the field for that point, but it's up to you for that part then. And should resumes be sent as a PDF or a Word doc? That's a good question. I generally send mine as a PDF, just because a Word doc formatting gets kind of weird and screwy if you send a Word document, but if you send a PDF, generally the formatting is kind of laminated in place and it's stuck where it is. And when they go to print it, it prints cleaner as a PDF than it does as a Word doc. So I would recommend PDFs. And if you don't have the software to change it over to a PDF, like if you don't have Acrobat Reader or something like that, if you just Google Word to PDF free, a couple of sites will come up, and I've used them a lot of times without any issues. So just be careful because they do limit how many documents you can change over and stuff for free.
Okay.
Great.
And we have time for like one more question because we did start a little late. So if you guys have anything else, I can do one more question before ending our meeting. All right, then understand that Rebecca did give us all clear that she would review our resumes. So that is so great, Rebecca. I think you did a great job. If we can just give her a reaction or a thank you or something, I
Great
really
job.
appreciate it. Yes.
My resume is on its way.
I put both my VISTA email and my personal email, just because, you know, it's up to you how comfortable you feel sending it to me. But if you want me to take a look at your resume, I'd be happy to. I'm glad that this was helpful for everyone, and
Yeah.
please spread the word and what you've learned to your fellow Vistas and cohorts and friends and family, and keep people from going to resume writing companies. That's the main thing.
That is a good takeaway. And Kay, thank you for your HR insight. I really think I got behind
Thank you, Kay.
a little bit.
Welcome.
So that was excellent. Thank you. All right. You guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks again.